Welcome here to our Master Distillers panel. We're excited to have you all join us today. I'll sit down and join the crowd here. So the big picture today is we're really just highlighting a lot of alumni from the University of Kentucky who've gone on through their careers to advance to the level of Master Distiller. And we wanted to spend a little time trying to introduce what the concept is, what that job title is, and really understand how that career progression works. And finally, sort of get around to questions that you guys might have for our panelists here today. So that's the big picture of what we're going for. Really excited to have you all join us today. And I will, quickly go through the formal PR material on each person up here to thoroughly embarrass them. All right. Alex Castle, Master Distiller and VP at Old Dominick Distillery. Making spirits isn't as much as a job as it is a calling. Alex found her calling early on. As a Kentucky native, there's a passion for good bourbon that runs deep. As a chemical engineer, there's a love of the process that takes something simple and makes it sublime. Her talent and passion and creativity are why she was supervising Wild Turkey's 24-hour day operation at only 24 years old. And that's why we're proud to have her continue her legacy at Old Dominick. For her many accomplishments and tireless pursuit of her excellence, Alex Castle was appointed the state of Tennessee's first female head distiller, and now she holds the title Master Distiller and Senior Vice President. In 2020, Alex was elected the first female president of the Tennessee Distillers Guild, a position she still holds today. Alex also represents the craft distillers across the country as a member of the Craft Advisory Council for the Distilled Spirits Council of America. So, quick welcome. Thank you, Alex. All right, next up we have Harlan Wheatley. Harlan's formal education in chemistry and chemical engineering brought him to Buffalo Trace Distillery, but it's the on-the-job experience that led him to become the resident master distiller in 2005. Born in Mount Sterling, Kentucky, Harlan spent almost all of his life in the bluegrass. After relocating and spending much of his youth in Florence, Kentucky, Harlan attended Northern Kentucky University, attaining his degree in chemistry. He then migrated to full work time at a chemical company in central Kentucky, while completing a chemical engineering degree at the University of Kentucky. Gaining formal education in distillation and separation techniques, Harlan joined the distillery as a supervisor in 1995. Not long after, the distillery was rechristened and the flagship Buffalo Trace bourbon was introduced. It marked a new era in the distillery's esteemed history, and Harlan continued to make his mark, and he was promoted to distillery manager in 2000. Harlan was named master distiller in 2005, becoming Buffalo Trace's sixth master distiller since the Civil War. Having worked in every aspect of production from raw materials to barrel aging, Master Distiller Harlan has driven many initiatives, including solidifying standards and consistency, quality focus, and efficiency gains. He is responsible for all distilling and aging operations for the Sazerac Company while promoting and educating the public on some of the world's finest bourbon whiskeys. Harlan has been recognized for his achievements numerous times. He is a four-time James Beard Award nominee in the Outstanding Wine and Spirits Professional category, and he was named Distillery Manager of the Year at Whiskey Magazine's Icon of Whiskey America Awards in 2014. The Northern Kentucky University Chemistry and Biochemistry Department awarded him its 2019 Outstanding Alumni Award, and in 2021, he was inducted into the University of Kentucky's College of Engineering Hall of Distinction. Welcome, Harlan. We'll keep active on different media sources. Lastly, Cody Giles. A native of Adair County, Kentucky, head distiller Cody Giles is a graduate of the University of Kentucky Chemical Engineering program and their Distillation Wine and Brewing Studies program. After completing his formal education, he joined the Pepper Distillery in 2017 while under construction and has been a critical member of the team since the distillery filled its first barrel. Cody's overseeing distillation, maturation, and bottling of multiple whiskeys, as well as the expansion projects at the distillery in Lexington and warehouse property in Midway. Welcome, Cody. All right, so let's kick it off with just a quick opportunity for each of you to sort of give your opinion and of really the essence and the nature of what it is to be a master distiller, and any sort of additional advice you want to kick things off with. So we'll start with Alex.
I'm just totally going to hand this off to someone else first. I think master distiller is going to be different for everyone. There's so many different types of master distiller. Um, for me, it was about being in production for a long amount of time. I won't put years to it because I think it's different for everybody. But for me, it was an honor to get it at Old Dominic because it was my company's way of saying that you've done everything we've ever asked of you and beyond, and you've exceeded all of our expectations as distiller. So now we want to give you this title that carries a lot of weight, especially in the States. Beyond that, it's a title. It's kind of how I think of it.
Well, I think for the majority of distilleries, has to be somebody running the distillery and in charge. And most of the time, to me, it's no different than a master plumber or master carpenter or master whatever. They've done that long enough to truly master the trade. I think a lot of the work that gets done is measured by their products, that they're delivering. Sometimes you see somebody start up a brand new distillery and the person's never distilled a day in their life and they're called a master distiller. And, there's a little bit of, for me personally, I feel like it takes time to, get that title and truly earn the title. But over time, that person will distill and he will truly master distilling at that site. So it all depends on the site. At Buffalo Trace, it's a fairly large operation. It takes a lot of time. I remember the early days and how long it took to truly kind of feel like you can run the operation. It took a few years to get that done. So it's just a title. She's right. It is a title, and it's one that you earn, and that's the way I think.
Yeah, sort of going along with Harlan's point, I think a master distiller is is a problem solver. First and foremost, I guess, like a distillery can be interesting in terms of you're using an organic process to sort of get your product, so that can always be variable. And then just the mechanical side of things, learning, getting firsthand experience with just pumps, valves, things like that, control loops, all these things. So yeah, it's a time thing, and I signed my signature on my email with the head distiller plant manager because I don't like calling myself a master distiller as of now either, just because I've only been in it for almost 5 years now. So my first barrels of whiskey are just now getting 4 and 5, and I think once those start getting reviewed, feel a little bit better about it maybe, but yeah, I think it's a time thing like any craft.
Wonderful. So now's the time we go for a shameless plug. What things did you learn at the University of Kentucky that set you guys up for your careers in this field?
So I sort of started in chemical engineering because I liked chemistry and I thought I was pretty good at math. So I was like, well, this sort of makes sense. So didn't really know where I wanted to go with it. And then around my sophomore, junior year, I think I heard about the program and some of the classes they started offering, and I was like, well, that also makes sense. And then I saw that a lot of master distillers were chemical engineers, and I was like, well, that's sort of cool. So, yeah, the professors, Dr. DeBolt, everyone's who involved in that, they have good connections with the industry in Kentucky. Dr. DeBolt, who set me up with Amir when he was getting started rebuilding the distillery on Manchester Street. And that, along with, because I think at least for me personally, I grew up, I've sort of been through whiskey tours of various distilleries and things like that. You've been around the process, so you sort of have an idea of how it all works. But getting your foot in the door, especially in a small operation like that, being in a critical role was a big part of why I'm sort of at where I am now with the company. So all of those things.
I think as I think back on each one of those classes that you're taking, you always think, how am I going to use this in real life? And for the most part, in chemical engineering, most of those classes, you will use some of it. And really what it does then, when you get out into whatever job, even if it's not in distilling, it'll give you confidence to tackle the issues. And when your boss comes to you and says, I need you to work on this project, you've got the confidence to, to get that done. So I think the University of Kentucky, even before the distilling program, prepared people very well to be able to tackle those issues. And this distilling program that's out there now is a no-brainer. I mean, I remember when you started the program, and I talked to Seth a lot myself, and I said, there's only one place in the country currently out in California that you can go and get any kind of type of classes. And that's ridiculous when all the bourbon distilleries were in Kentucky at the time. And of course, since then, there's 2,000 distilleries in the country, which is another reason to take those classes, because now there's a whole lot more jobs out there than there was when I started. Way back in 1995, there was maybe 2 jobs, and now there's thousands. So, getting that education will be very valuable. You can use it for a lot of different things, but each one of those classes, there's pieces of it that you'll use professionally.
For me, it wasn't so much the coursework. Yes, I still use it. I try not to think about it too much on a day-to-day basis. But chemical engineering is a very tough program. Any engineering is a tough program. And to get through it, you have to learn discipline. And for me, that has been critical throughout my career. It's a tough job. Production is 24/7. And so you have to have discipline to be able to get through that type of rigorous schedule. But then I was also fortunate enough to get a co-op while in school, right when Alltech was starting what would become Top Branch Bourbon. And so that was actually probably the most valuable thing during my 5 years, was getting to help start up a distillery.
All right, so now we're gonna turn, see if you guys have any questions. Anybody wanna kick us off with questions? I'll work my way around here. All right, get you the microphone.
So this is for Buffalo Trace. How do you expect your expansion to impact being able to run the distillery? You talked a lot about how master distiller is learning how to master your distillery. Is there going to be a new learning curve, or do you think it'll just be a slight bump in the road?
Well, so the answer to that is yes, there will be a new learning curve, because we're starting up a whole lot of new equipment. And we've also changed a little bit of the technology in our dry house. So there's some things that we're going to have to learn there. But on the distilling and cooking side, one of the things we were big sticklers about is keep the technology the same and just make it bigger and more of it. So the process on that side should be pretty straightforward, as long as it works the way it's supposed to, which it won't. And so we should be all right there, and we'll have to learn about the dry house. Now, the good thing is we know what it should be and the way it should run, and we just have to make it and dial it up, tweak it. And but it's exciting, because it's a once in a lifetime thing. We spent $200 million in 2 years, and we're almost complete. At January 1st, we're going to fire it up, and we're actually, like today, we're firing up the beer still, and getting it tuned out and figuring things out, and so we can test fire it before we have to have it. And we're in the middle of doing all that right now. So we're learning about the ins and outs of all the new equipment. So it's exciting. Once in a lifetime.
Absolutely. Other questions? You were thinking about it.
I guess for each of you guys, what do you think your all's biggest challenge has been, like as a master distiller or as a distiller in general? Like, because I know you guys have a lot of experience. I know there's been a lot of challenges. So what sticks out to you guys in your mind?
Well, I think I'll start since I have the mic. But for us, it's pretty easy to answer. The expansion and demand of whiskey is at an all-time high. Our last peak was in 1972, and we have more than doubled that since 1972. So, you know, we're just trying to keep up. We're behind. You know, you go to the liquor stores, our bottles are gone. We can't keep enough on the shelf, and we're not even global. I mean, we don't sell anything globally yet. So, and we want to be global. So, just keeping up with the demand. And so, we've hired 1,200 people in 2 years. And in 1995, when I started, we had 50, and we now have 5,000. So the company, and I always say that's happened pretty fast, but really it's been 2.5 decades. So I guess it's not very, it feels fast to me because I've seen it all happen. But the hiring process and getting people, the good people, we've hired, like I said, 1,200 people in the last 2 years. So, you know, that's been a very difficult, challenging thing for us, but it's good problems to have, right? So.
For me, the biggest challenge was making the shift from a place like Wild Turkey. A mountain of resources, mechanics, electricians around the clock. Had a lot of help. Going to Old Dominic, I was it. I was the only person on a 4-person team that had any industry experience, building out a brand new distillery. Even our pipe fitters had never done a distillery before. Our design team wanted our pipes to create a really pretty design on the wall. If you've ever taken a class about pipes and flow and things like that, you know you want to have as few turns in that pipe as you can have. And so that transition and having the confidence to speak up, to say no, you can't do it, but knowing you're the only voice that's going to have that, whereas at Wild Turkey there were multiple voices to back you up. So that transition was and still is the most challenging thing I deal with.
So I would say, probably as a personal challenge, I sort of got a battlefield promotion. I would say, we were getting 4 years into my distilling career, and was sort of second to the master distiller at that point. Wasn't really expecting him to leave to take another job, so that's just how it happens sometimes. And that was honestly very terrifying. Always gonna have a little bit of self-doubt and stuff, but knew that it was a challenge worth doing. That I'll continue to learn a lot, and I still learn a lot every day. But knew that it'd be really good. Just for my career going forward, to just go ahead and do it and have the confidence in myself that I could. So that was probably my biggest challenge, I would say. And I'm still working through that. I'm only what, 4 months in, so. And we were in the middle of installing new equipment, a larger stillage tank. Our warehouse just got finished, so we were in the process of moving all of our barrels that were in contract storage into our own roof. Gonna have dumping and processing out there, so more expansion projects out there, and yeah, I'm ready for it, but that it's definitely challenging.
All right, other questions?
So the distillation process for your all's products, I'm sure, is pretty tried and true at this point. So what are your all's responsibilities in terms of improving the product?
Well, a lot of it, so it is pretty tried and true. I came from, I would say, a Seagram's MGP sort of distiller's coaching tree, if you want to call that. That's what my mentor learned from the distillery managers out there at MGP. So that process is pretty solidified in terms of what numbers you want to hit and what numbers you expect coming out, as far as yields and acids and pH. As far as improving the product, what our distillery strategy sort of, and this sort of goes with what Seagram's would do with like Canadian whiskey, is doing looking at mash bills, and we're specifically bourbon mash bills, and how we can maybe make different expressions of bourbon with, we're using rye, malted rye, raw barley, and malted barley. Now we can do expressions of each of those specific grains and blend at the end to try and do something being creative with bourbon that way. So I would say a lot of it might be on that side. And a lot of people are doing barrel finishing, and barrel finishing is pretty popular right now, I would say, as far as double oaking things and then wine casks and things of that nature. Things like Scotch whiskey's been doing for a long time that I think is interesting to do with bourbon.
I'd say there are so many variables. It's literally endless how many different things you can produce, all within the rules of making the different types of whiskeys. So bourbon whiskey is probably has the most rules of all the whiskeys that you have to follow, but within those rules you can vary recipes, distillation, barrels, aging, all the different things that you can do. And a lot of times I'll start a meeting and I'll say, hey guys, we've been doing this for over 200 years. We should have this figured out by now, you know. And we also have a pretty in-depth experimental program where we look at all those variables. And, you know, we literally have thousands of barrels in inventory of experiments. And we have multiple experiments in play at all times. And we have labels that we release it under, so we get feedback from the public. So the experimental collection that we have comes in a 375, looks like a lab bottle, and we put on the label all the different things that we do to it, and then we get feedback. And then the perfect example is our 4-grain was an experiment, and we put it out there, and we kind of knew it was going to be really good because we tasted along the way, and we were really happy with it. And then lo and behold, the public really liked it. And then we started releasing it under the E.H. Taylor label, 4-grain, and then it won the world's best whiskey. So, you know, you get that feedback, you put it out, and so we've got a lot of those in the warehouse. So we do all of our legacy bourbons and whiskeys, but then we also have this pretty big experimental program for new product development. And you got to have something new in the hopper, or people are going to get tired of you. You know, it's just like any other business, and that's how we do it.
For me, it's not so much improving the product. If you know your system and you're happy with what it's producing, it's about maintaining that product and ensuring the quality. You can improve efficiencies, improve the process, reduce waste. Those, to me, that's where the improvement comes from. But then there's absolutely how to create a new product, how to enhance it, how to have a little bit of fun, because distilling can be fun. I'm kind of laughing because we do the exact same thing. We have an experimental line that's distillery only. And that line is how we developed our gin. We released a couple different ones, got the feedback, and now we have a gin out in the market that was a result of that. We do barrel finishes. We work with local breweries and do beer barrel finishes on our bourbons. But by doing it on that small scale, you get to invest a lot less money and take a lot less risk, and hopefully it ends up paying off in getting best whiskey of the world, you know, eventually. So.
You mentioned that you have endless variations that you can make, and that there's a ton of variables. So how often and how do you deal with those variables going wrong, especially on like a day-to-day? Because I'm sure that it's not as streamlined as you would want.
Yeah, it's never streamlined. Starts with the grain. You can do quality checks when it comes in, ensure your moisture content, organoleptic qualities, so smell of it. You start there because that is a variable that you can't control. If it's not good, get rid of it. And then from there, at Old Dominic, and we saw it at Wild Turkey too, a lot of your system is automated, and you put those in so that you can monitor those variables and hopefully have a program smart enough to control those variables. So if a fermentation starts to get too hot, the computer knows to kick the water on, and you're going to control that. And it keeps it within that range. So for us, that's how we do that. Now sometimes it even still goes off the rails, and you end up with distillate that maybe is a little bit off, depending on what that is, how off it is. What we frequently do is we'll barrel it, and we mark those barrels so that we know to keep an eye on them, taste them as they progress, to see if it carried through, and then make a determination based on what happened at that point.
Yeah, I'd say you're right that all those variables do change. I mean, the weather, the wood, the people, it's all a lot of biological processes that you have a hard time managing sometimes. But things like wood, you try to educate yourself as much as possible on where the wood comes from. I mean, we own our own sawmills, and we procure our own logs, and we produce our own barrels. So we're able to really look into the wood and make sure it's diversified, make sure it's not all from one valley, that you get it from multiple locations, and because the wood is a huge impact, especially on bourbon whiskey. I mean, that's probably the most influence on the bourbon whiskey than anything is the wood. And then you got the environment. So if you put that barrel on the first floor, we have warehouses that some of them are 9 stories tall. And so every one of those floors deliver a different aging result. And so we have to factor that all in when we're dumping these barrels based on anticipated use. So if we're going to have a 3-year-old or a 6-year-old or an 8 or 23 for us, even 25. So we've got to factor that in. And one of the other things we're exploring are things like, if the Scotch guys, they kind of make us mad every now and then, because they do things, they make 50-year-old whiskey. There's no reason we can't make 50-year-old whiskey, but we got to change things, because you can't just stick a barrel in a warehouse and let it sit for 50 years. So you got to change that environment, and how do you do that and make it taste right, because it would literally taste like licking a oak tree if you don't do it right. And so all those things you have to factor, all those variables are things you have to figure out as you're making the whiskey. It's just part of the job.
Yeah, it's like I wouldn't have much more to add, but I would agree with both of these guys up here that is coming from a pretty small operation craft distillery. We're looking at all those variables too that they had mentioned. I would say forget about it. Our cooking process essentially, especially, is more manual, I would say, than some of these guys. So we're physically turning a valve to put steam onto a cooker. So that introduces a little more human error. So every now and then we boil a cook over a little bit, goes out the vent pipe and back through under the cooker. It gets, or leave. Did I tell you about that? Or leave a valve open and steam the mill line and deform all the PVC pipe. And then spend the whole day replacing all of it. So yeah, maybe a little bit more interesting to control those variables, but like they would say, if we have anomalies, we're gonna always mark those down and then eventually mark the barrels once the distillate comes off. But I would also say, a clean distillation and is really you're gonna have minimal off flavors off the still, and then the barrels, like Harlan said, has so much impact on the end product, because I know we fill our fermenters would fill maybe 2.5 barrels, 53-gallon barrels, so we're gonna have a little bit more distillate variability there. And at a bigger place, you're gonna fill hundreds, if not thousands, of barrels off one distillate tank. And we experience it too with our source barrels. We'll source barrels from MGP, and they're all from one lot, which is essentially all from the same tank, went in the barrel on the same day, went to the same area in the rick house. And these 2 barrels could be right next to each other and taste completely different. So barrel has a big impact.
All right, I'm going to jump in. I think we've been spending a lot of time talking about the technical aspects of keeping a production facility running consistently, changing that. What non-technical, more so stray a little away from chemical engineering, talking about leading teams, doing some of the marketing, the PR, managing the business. What other elements are in that master distiller role that you wouldn't have expected, or what are the more challenging ones that you've seen?
I would think this is probably where it varies a lot. Master distiller to master distiller, I would say. So I really don't do much. I don't do much sales or PR things. That's all handled by our owner. He has the relationships with the distributors and knows his way around the beverage industry really well. Has been involved in it for a while. Managing people is something I'm learning a lot about every day since I haven't really done it until now, and it's very challenging. That might be one of the more challenging things. Going back to challenges is efficiently managing a team and delegating jobs and knowing and figuring out people's strengths and weaknesses and making everything cohesive. Because I have 3 full-time distillers and a couple of interns from UK, and we do a good amount of work for our small team. So it's really important to like have synergy in that way. So managing people really important and something I'll need to continue to work on.
I'd say, I remember, I don't like to sound like the old guy, but in '95, the atmosphere at the time was production is here and marketing and sales is over here and we're not going to talk. Which, as soon as I started, I realized that that's kind of silly. And marketing and sales is a very important part of the business. And if you think back, as the demand and popularity of bourbons increased, one of the things that was going on is production people were going out and telling people and sharing experiences with people. And what it does is it brings a story to the brand, and people remember that. And so it really helps with sales and marketing. And they do ask me to go out with the sales team from time to time, and I will go to a market and we'll do this right here, talk to some of their best customers or whatever, and taste the products and introduce the products, because for a salesman, it's just another tool for them to, again, connect the stories of every one of those products. And then that way the person can be, interested in your product and maybe want to buy it and rebuy it and all that. So it just goes hand in hand, because the better you do at that, the more production you get later on and more jobs and all that. So I learned that early on, critically important.
For me, I'd have to say PR aspect is probably the most alien thing for me and the hardest one for me to have kind of accepted in my role. I'm a very, very stereotypical chemical engineer, where being on the stage holding this mic is terrifying. And so when I started 14 years ago, I never would have been comfortable doing this. But going out with the sales team, you're speaking on behalf of the company, being up on stage, being on camera, doing interviews, still the hardest thing, but also learning to do that and accepting it as just part of the job. You realize it's actually a very fun part of it. But yeah, so that's, I know engineers, this is not our forte, public speaking. It's not something most of us excel at in this program. But definitely get over that fear, get over that hurdle, because it will benefit you, honestly, regardless of what you do.
One thing to add to that, and I'm glad you brought it up, that skill that you're talking about, if you can get a chance to take a class at University of Kentucky, or ever, I don't know what they call those, when you learn speeches or whatever the classes are, it would be very helpful for you. It will benefit you in the job market, no matter what job you're in. So that's something to keep in mind if you don't have that on your. Okay, oh yeah.
All right, additional questions, yeah? Oh, go back around. We'll go back to the new person.
So I guess my question is more for Mr. Giles, Ms. Castle. Obviously Buffalo Trace is a name that is well established in the bourbon industry, lots of award-winning products. But how do startup distilleries and some of your craft distilleries really make a name for themselves and stand out in such a heavily saturated bourbon industry?
I'll just sort of give you the overview of how our owner did it, and I think it was honestly probably a really smart way. So he was lucky enough that the James Pepper brand was just lost to obscurity, and no one had claimed it. So I think it was like 2008 or 2009. He went ahead and bought the rights to the name. Knew there was a old distillery site in Lexington, and started sourcing barrels and putting the James Pepper label on it. And he started the 1776 line of bourbon and rye. Eventually, with that cash flow, was able to start the renovations and bring a still in and bring everything online to start doing his old pepper line. And that was sort of his strategy. But his key was having a really good story too. So that helps a ton if you have good, authentic history. He spent a lot of that time gathering old bottles, old advertising material. We have an office full of it. What's in the museum might just be like a very small fraction of what he's collected. But he's not really he's never really distilled right before, so he's just a really good businessman. Knew how to connect a story and a product. Had been around the wine industry in California for a long time, so all those factors sort of really played into him having a good, successful start. Also being on the West Coast, making relationships with distributors, having a good distribution is honestly really key, because especially in the craft section of things, a distributor is going to have a pretty small section for his craft, and being his 100 proof bourbon for the cocktails, the 100 proof rye spot, that's really key. And so he had a good relationship with big distributors, and that has helped him immensely.
You can set yourself apart first by making gin or vodka be different. Really, you make that out of necessity while you wait for your whiskey to age. But as a startup brand, a craft brand, for us, it's been chip away at it. Don't try to conquer the country. Conquer your hometown, conquer your home state, and then spread out from there. But it's a lot of boots on the ground. It's a lot of spend a lot of money before you make any money. And working with your distributors, show them that you are in it, that you are willing to put in more effort than they are, because then that'll get them to work for you. And just get out there in the market. Force your way in, remind people who you are, do the in-store tastings, do events, and just be patient, because it takes time.
I'll add one thing. So we dabble in that also. So we have 11 distilleries, and I would say 4 of them are craft, and one of them doesn't even have a product yet. We opened a distillery in Tennessee, your competitor, and we're building inventory, and we've been doing that for about 6 years. And it would be easier for us to say, let's go. That's the benefit of having a large company own you, is you can wait as long as it takes. And so they're just socking away really good whiskey. And then for us, it's all about the quality of the spirit. And then the rest of it, and again, because we're lucky, we can afford to do that. We can wait. And so it's a little bit different than a traditional craft. But then we've got a craft distillery in France making cognac. I mean, they've got 3 little pot stills turning out 71 hectoliters, whatever that means. It's 71,000 liters, right? But These are very small operations, but again, they're owned by a larger company, so it's a little bit different the way you launch things. We can focus on quality, not so much getting it out there.
Thank you.
So I work with the Career Center here on campus, and so thinking about that, and today we have the career fair, and we've had days of career fairs, and you mentioned you had interns. So when thinking about hiring the interns and new professionals in the field, what are you looking for?
Well, the intern program, and we also have a program called the Leadership Development Program, where we hire new graduates and they come in and learn all aspects of our operation. And it's about a 2-year program for them. And then once they're done, then they're basically qualified to take over a full-time position with us. So we've only just started that about 3 years ago. And the intern program is also about 3 years old. So that's a no-brainer for a business, especially for all the companies that are growing like we are. It's just a place where we can go find and draw talent. And we're unfortunately not only looking at University of Kentucky, although I'm focused on University of Kentucky. We're looking at 3 or 4 different universities because there's competition, right? I mean, we just want the best that we can find. And again, I'm focused on University of Kentucky, but I'm only one person. There's several people looking. But we've got interns and LDPs, leadership development people, in all fields, marketing, sales, logistics, and then distilling is a big one for me especially. So it's really an important part of it to draw talent.
So, like I was saying earlier, a lot of our operations, physical and hands-on, I would say. So, anyone who's willing to work hard, I would say, is anyone I'm looking for. Sometimes we start up early too, so 6 a.m. starting. So really, for our interns, they get out as much as they want to get from it. Some of our interns have gone on to supervisory positions at Beam and Wild Turkey. So because they're going to do everything that I do essentially, which also includes some not so fun work like the bottling line, which is probably the least enjoyable experience. But yeah, as soon as our interns start, they're going to do the day-to-day running the still, running the cook, barreling, dumping, processing, which I would say is pretty unique to just as compared to an internship at a larger distillery. Really hands-on, and you can get a lot from it if you want to.
Being based in Memphis, I don't get to be too choosy in my new hires from a production standpoint because we don't have any distilleries in that area. We're it. So every single person on my production team has had 0 industry experience. I trained them from the ground up, which is a lot more work on my plate, but that's really the only option we have right now. Tennessee, we are working on a distilling program as well, so maybe I'll get to benefit from that. But we still do a lot of hands-on. We throw around 50-pound green bags. So usually in the interview process, it's, are you okay with manual labor? It's not climate controlled, so I don't want you to complain that it's hot. It's Memphis. It's always 100+ degrees with 90% humidity. Don't complain. So finding people that are willing to put up with that and do it with a smile, which is not always easy, especially when things are not going well. But yeah, that's really what we're looking for. It's just, we're a small team. We want people that get along with the rest of our team.
Okay, so I guess looking to the future, because maybe hopefully I can be in your shoes one day, and maybe everyone else here beside me will be as well. What do you guys see coming for the future of like bourbon and distilling? and just even like whiskey in general? Like what kind of changes do you guys see? Because I've heard stuff about climate control being tested and different things like that. So where do you guys see the industry really starting to go?
I mean, with over 2,300 distilleries in the country, I think it's, all bets are off. I think you can go anywhere. Yes, climate control is a thing. I tend to be a little more traditionalist, so I don't know if I will embrace that, but it's absolutely something that the industry is starting to take ownership of. I think you're going to start to see even more experimentation with grain because we've got so many farmers doing heritage and heirloom varieties. So I think we'll see more of that. And I think we'll start to see more regionally identified whiskey types. So I think it's Arkansas claims rye whiskey as its state spirit. Tennessee, of course, we have Tennessee whiskey, and it has its own identity away from just bourbon. And I think we're going to start to see more and more of that in the States, kind of like you see in Scotch, where it's all Scotch, but there's how many different types of Scotch, and they all have an identity. So I think you're just going to see more variety.
Yeah, I think we feel we're pretty excited about the future, and that's why we're spending the $200 million. We think there's we've got a ways to go to catch Scotch. The Scotch guys got a head start on us, and we think there's business out there to be had from them and also new business. So the future continues to look bright, especially globally. I do think that from a craft distillery perspective, I think it'll level off some. I mean, because eventually there'll be enough distilleries to supply the areas, and eventually you'll see the bad ones fall off and good ones will stick around, and they'll continue to. But I think it'll kind of level off at some point. But again, there's thousands and thousands of jobs, which is great for the industry, and a lot of bright opportunities for guys like you.
Yeah, so I guess I've heard from my mentors and people I've talked to in the industry horror stories from the 90s for the bourbon industry because it was pretty bad, I hear. But I as far as I'm concerned, I don't think that's gonna happen again, really. I think, like Ron said, there could be a slight correction in the craft market in America once it is fully saturated. I definitely think it's important for all brands to be looking internationally. I know Japan might be drinking the most bourbon per capita right now out of anybody. India is a huge growth market from what I've been told, and I think that's probably the next target to be looking at for those insane the markets with insane growth in the bourbon sector. So, yeah, not much more to add. That's covered pretty well.
Piggybacking off the career internship question, can you talk about your just career trajectory, like the different positions that you held getting up to master distiller over the years?
So I started at James Pepper in 2017 as a distiller, I would say, or operator, and we were so small at that point too. I mean, it was at one point it was just me and Aaron, the master distiller at the time, doing the. We weren't doing seven days a week yet though, so that was nice. Yeah, we had weekends off for that first year. It was pretty cool. But I went from there to not really any more title changes until getting the plant manager role. So my trajectory is pretty short so far. But I've really enjoyed working with the company, and I've had the owner's a really good guy. Really cares about his business, because I think, as far as I know, it's his only one. But puts a lot of work into it and a lot of passion for it, so it makes it helpful, for sure.
I guess for me, it's been a traditional start at the bottom, work your way up. I started again where it was 50 people, not much business. We were looking for work. We had about 4 or 5 months of distilling, and the rest of the time I worked in the lab when I started as a distillery supervisor. And I was very, very fortunate at the time when I started. Those 50 people, they were all industry veterans. I had Elmer T. Lee, who started right after World War II, and I had Gary Gayhart, who started the year I was born. And these guys had tons of experience, and so I would wear them out with the questions, trying to learn, and because I always looked into the future and knew that there was a lot of potential. And as time went on, I got promoted to distillery manager and master distiller, and then I became a regional distiller, and then now I'm in charge of the globe, whatever that means. So I'm in charge of the distilling for Sazerac. So it's just as time moves forward, and if you do a good job, and you're very diligent in your work, and try to get along with all the people along the way, because it is a people job, and that's kind of the secret to it, I think.
So I started as a co-op in 2008 with Alltech. I was in their engineering office. I actually wasn't even hired to work at their brewery. They didn't have a distillery at the time, but was there when they actually installed the stills and commissioned it. So that's how I got started, was actually cleaning the stills, doing the grunt work, and then helping to commission the equipment and ultimately writing their SOPs. And then from there, actually got out of the industry after graduation because no one was hiring. The craft distillers had all started, but were too poor to hire anybody. So I ended up as a supervisor at a detergent company. But then from there was able to become a supervisor at Wild Turkey. I started off as the least senior, I was the junior supervisor in the production department. And within a month, I became the senior supervisor because the other one got moved. And so with that, I was in charge of grains receiving, milling, mashing, fermentation and distillation, and the dryer house. And I was in charge of 2 shifts, actually. I did 3rd shift and 1st shift, 6 days a week. And from there, just kind of learned the entire process. My boss was grooming me to take his job as production manager, so he was teaching me how to do the budget for the department. I was on the expert sensory panel, got to help with some product development. And then from there, actually got recruited to move to Memphis and help start up Old Dominic. Started as head distiller. It was just the title that their consultant told them to use, which was fine. Built it out, and then a couple of years later, master distiller, and then senior vice president.
Wonderful. Well, we've come to the end of our time. Alex, Arlen, Cody, I really appreciate you guys making the time. Thank you one last time.